The first story took place several years ago. He said he used to date a man from Baklou. They had been together for many years. Although they were in a long-distance relationship, they met often. His boyfriend frequently visited his house, or he would visit his boyfriend's home. Both families knew and supported their relationship. A few years back, during the September 2nd holiday, he, his boyfriend, and 6 of his boyfriend's friends, 8 people in total, decided to travel by motorbike through Ca Mau, Qianzhong, and Anzhong. The day before the trip, his boyfriend picked him up and he stayed at his boyfriend's house for the night. At around 1 or 2 a.m., the group gathered and began the trip. When they reached Ca Mau, the sky wasn't fully bright yet and breakfast shops were still closed. Everyone was tired from riding for hours, so they stopped at a hammock cafe to rest and drink water. While resting, a guy in the group named Tan, who was straight, tall, and handsome, needed to use the toilet. He asked the cafe owner, who told him to use the restroom behind the house. But someone was already inside, and because he couldn't hold it, he walked farther behind the cafe, into the trees, to relieve himself. After finishing, he returned to the group and lay in a hammock. They rested until around 7 a.m. before leaving to find breakfast. But everyone noticed Tan acting strangely, irritable, glaring at people for no reason. At first they assumed he was just tired from the long ride. When the food arrived, his behavior became even stranger. He ate in an unusually delicate, feminine way, cupping his hand under the spoon, covering his mouth while chewing, almost like a shy girl. Everyone was puzzled, so the narrator jokingly said, "Tan, why are you acting so dainty today?" Normally, they joke like that all the time. But Tan suddenly glared and snapped, "Mind your own business. I can do whatever I want." His outburst was loud enough that people around the restaurant stared. Everyone was shocked, wondering why he reacted so aggressively. They continued their trip and explored the area until evening. The group rented a cheap, simple room with mats on the floor for the night. When they invited Tan to join them for dinner and sightseeing, he refused, claiming he was tired and wanted to stay in the room. The group decided to let him rest and went without him. When they returned around 9 or 10 p.m., they were startled. Tan had rummaged through the narrator's backpack, taken out his makeup, and was sitting there with heavy foundation, dark eyebrows, eyeliner, and lipstick. The narrator was upset because his belongings had been scattered everywhere. He confronted Tan, asking why he took his cosmetics without permission. Instead of apologizing, Tan suddenly stood up aggressively and shouted, "What? Which of this is yours? What? Can't your sister borrow it for a bit?" Everyone was stunned. Tan was straight, but his tone and mannerisms were strange and hostile. Others had to hold him back because it looked like he wanted to attack the narrator. As they calmed him down, Tan suddenly turned to a guy named Duke, tall and handsome, and threw himself into Duke's arms, stroking him and saying, "You're so handsome, so handsome." The entire group realized something was very wrong. They all lay down to sleep. The narrator, a Buddhist who usually chants before bed, quietly recited Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, and played a soft recording of the Great Compassion Mantra at the lowest volume, just enough for himself to hear. Suddenly, while still lying down, Tan shouted, "Turn it off! Turn it off! My head hurts. If you don't turn it off, I'll break your neck." His yelling woke everyone in the room. The narrator, who had held back all day, finally confronted him, explaining he wasn't bothering anyone and asking why Tan was acting so strangely. He asked, Is there someone inside you? The moment he said that, Ton leapt from across the room to the foot of the narrator's mat in less than a second, something no human could normally do. Everyone was terrified. Pointing at him, Ton shouted, "Do you know who I am? I'm a demon. I was raped and killed by 6 or 7 men. I suffered. Look, I've grown 3 fangs already." He pretended to show long fangs even though none were visible. Everyone panicked. The narrator clung to his boyfriend and began chanting Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, while others recited Buddha's name. But Ton laughed and said, "I'm not afraid. I'm just annoyed." The narrator remembered a tip from a storyteller named T. If ordinary chanting doesn't work, try Om Mani Padme Hum. He switched immediately and repeated it 3 times. Suddenly, Ton grabbed his head and staggered back, yelling for him to stop. But the narrator continued chanting. Ton screamed that he would break his neck, but after more chanting, Ton collapsed and fainted. Everyone was terrified. They suspected the spirit might have entered him when he relieved himself behind the cafe. They called Ton's parents, who rushed overnight from Baklü with a monk. They arrived around 5 or 6 a.m. Ton woke briefly but looked dazed. The monk examined the room, then pointed at the ceiling and said, "There it is, hanging up there." No one else saw anything. The monk spoke to the air as if addressing someone, saying the spirit couldn't stay with Ton because he was human and it was not. He offered to help it and take it to a temple for guidance. Then he performed ritual movements and opened a small gourd bottle. A dark, foul-smelling cloud appeared on the ceiling, visible to everyone, and rushed into the gourd. The monk sealed it with a talisman, then tapped Ton's forehead 3 times, causing him to faint again. He explained Ton had lost 2 of his spiritual souls, and needed rituals to restore them. Ton's family took him home immediately. The narrator's group ended the trip and returned home. Later, Ton recovered completely. The monk said Ton had unknowingly urinated on the grave of the female spirit, which caused her to follow and possess him.